companies are moving to digital. And for direct interaction with the customers, delivery in Agile and DevOps. And from a quality perspective, it's all about speed, it's all about efficiency and agility. And the latest trend we see is physical. That's kind of the merger between the digital and the physical world, where it's all about creating trust and bringing the right experience to the end customers. These three focus areas, less trends, they coexist. So every client will have to focus their QA. And looking at this world, Cognizant is building the offerings and the strategy. But we also want more insight. So for this case, we actually asked Everest to do an independent research on the future of enterprise QA. Thank you very much. CJ, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Marco, for a kind introduction. And thank you, everybody, for taking out time from your busy schedules to join us today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. We are very excited to be here today. And first of all, I'd like to start with a note of thanks to the Cognizant team for being such thoughtful and passionate partners over the course of this research engagement. It's a topic which we are very involved with. We believe that as the world moves inevitably towards a digital-first narrative, quality and the manifestations of quality are also constantly evolving and changing, and it's a very important topic for us to understand where quality is taking us. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to start with a little bit of a meta framing of what quality really means in today's world. And we are then going to dive a little bit deeper into the results of the research. And as Marco mentioned, during the course of the presentation, feel free to log in your questions. At the end of the presentation, we'll have some dedicated time for Q&A. And don't forget to download the entire report. We hope you find it to be an interesting read. So with that, let's take a step back and look at what the world today means. And in many ways, I think of the world as being highly dichotomous and almost bipolar, if that's the word I'm looking for. On one hand, we see so much potential. We see so much potential for innovation. We see the role of technology becoming more and more important, and technology is used to create value for business, for society, and to do good in the world. Marco, if you move to the next slide, please. On the other hand, and when I speak about the good and the potential that lies, that's kind of your left-hand side of the slide. On the other hand, we are plagued by uncertainty, both from a macro and geopolitical standpoint, from an economic standpoint. And when I look a little bit deeper, even within that, there is tremendous role of technology in many ways. So technology also possesses, tremendous risks to our world today. Again, that risk could be economic, it could be societal, it could be for a particular business, it could be for individuals, it could be for consumers, it could be for entire economies. And Marco, if you move to the next slide, if you think of some of the implications of that, these are headlines that we have almost got used to, but maybe we shouldn't. If we think about each of these, they're fairly disturbing. Well, maybe not the people getting stranded at Heathrow. We are pretty used to that one. But regardless, the implications of technology and the risks of technology and the implications of that risk for entire businesses is pretty amplified today, and significantly more amplified than what it used to be. And if you think of this backdrop, then the question really begs itself. What does quality really mean, and what are the quality challenges that we face today? What does enterprise quality really mean in this day and age, right? Is it just a question of getting the application delivered, with full functionality and getting it done on time? Or is it something more profound, or is it something much more meaningful? So we started framing this question, and we started framing a response to this question of what quality means and what quality should mean in this day and age. And the way we thought about it is really, quality straddles three dimensions: disruption, experience, and trust. Marco, if you just click. So if you think about it, quality really is something that should govern and something that should assure the interactions between corporations, governments, consumers, citizens, and the role technology plays across these interactions. Technology fundamentally disrupts how businesses and governments operate. And there's good in that, there's opportunity in that. On the other hand, consumers and citizens seek technology to deliver memorable, superior experiences. At the same time, when they interact with the businesses and governments, they seek trust in those interactions. They need to know that their data is protected, that their devices are protected, right? And if you think about all these interactions, these three-way interactions, then quality really straddles all these three. And quality lies at that intersection. Enterprise quality lies at that intersection of trust, disruption, and experience. So the role of quality really has to be to help corporations and governments navigate technology disruption. Enterprise quality also has to monitor and consistently deliver superior experiences to customers, and at the same time maintain trust on every transaction. Everybody does quality a little bit differently. And when we tried to segment the market, and what we discovered was that there's an overwhelming set of companies which run quality assurance, right? And that's fundamentally anchored around application effectiveness, heavy focus on shift left and automation, lots of agile and integrated quality plus dev that's happening in those estates. I'm sure a lot of that sounds familiar to many of you on this webinar today. There's around 9% of companies which are a little bit behind. There, the focus is mostly on application functionality. Testing is still fairly manual. The organization model is very strongly centralized. Testers don't necessarily have development skills. They're classically waterfall in many situations, lagging on agile and DevOps adoption. However, the most interesting piece that we found was that there's this 7% of the universe that we surveyed. They do quality very differently. Their objective function is not about application functionality or even application effectiveness. Their objective function for enterprise quality is really, how do I protect and promote the business brand, right? So how do I assure the brand, right? They have not only automated, but they have placed a lot of intelligence in how they run quality. So this can be as simple as risk-based testing. At the same time, it can also be continuous feedback loops generated from product usage data and consumer data, which is used to feedback into feature functionality creation and new product features, right? Very interestingly, organizationally, we found that they're very, very different. So they're not strictly centralized, they're not completely decentralized, but they are very comfortable and sophisticated in the way they run a combination of a central quality model as well as highly sophisticated product teams, which are often embedded in businesses. Finally, they seem to have cracked the talent challenges far better than many of their peers. So they're very heavy on full stack SRE based talent models, right? Now, the question is, does everybody need to do this? No, the answer is every company has its own objectives, and not everybody needs to move all the way to the right and be at the far bleeding edge. But in general, this is the direction of maturity that we discovered. Also, what we discovered was that it's a journey. At any given point in time, there's no single company which has their entire IT portfolio and everything that they do in quality on the extreme right, nor would they have everything in the middle, nor would they have everything on the left. So it's a mix. But the predominant skew and the predominant direction of maturity is very, very clear. The question is, why should we do this? How does it help, right? And the reason we should do this is because the way we defined best-in-class quality is really who's delivering better business outcomes. And what we discovered is when we plotted quality capabilities against business outcomes, what we found was that there is a very strong correlation. So that 9% that you saw on the previous page, not only are they sophisticated in their quality function, but they actually deliver superior business outcomes to the level of 1.5 times what their peer average, right? And these are the companies which we call business assurance oriented enterprises. So the question actually begs itself, what is business assurance, right? So business assurance is essentially, we call business assurance a discipline that drives business outcomes by orchestrating quality as a key objective across the enterprise value chain. There are 4 key criteria or 4 key dimensions which create maximum impact, right? And so it's a little bit of the 80-20 rule, if you will, the 4 key dimensions that create maximum impact on this journey towards business assurance and superior business outcomes. They're what we call economics, continuous improvement / methodologies, their ability to leverage their ecosystem partners, and how they organize quality. We'll be talking about each one of them, but in a nutshell, if we think about it, economics is not only about how much money do we spend, but also how do we govern those investments. Continuous improvement is typically around methodologies and talent. Ecosystem partners is a very important component, and what kind of value do business assurance oriented companies seek from their partners is very differentiated. Finally, and probably one of the most critical parts, is how do they organize their quality function. So let's take a little bit of a deep dive, right? So let's look at the first one, economics. So no surprises, business assurance oriented companies are significantly more likely to invest more money in quality assurance, and that's not a surprise. If you spend more money, oftentimes good things will happen. But what's very interesting is we found companies which are making those investments, they are typically much more sophisticated and demanding in terms of how they think of return on that investment. So business assurance oriented companies not only look at classic QA centric metrics like test coverage or usage or time to market or reduced defects or cost of ownership, but they also look at business improvement metrics. So they look at direct brand metrics like net promoter scores or user satisfaction or business adoption, right? And One of the questions I would actually have for Marco here is, Marco, as you think about your time in the industry, how have you seen your more sophisticated customers evolve their thinking around how they measure return on their quality investments?
I think in the earlier years, every client actually, and it also goes for QA departments, were counting defects. So the number of defects was actually leading, but actually it never said anything about the quality because you cannot you have to look at, say, a priority one defect or how it will actually influence your business process. If you look nowadays, I think most clients are measuring metrics, say, product leakage, so how much defects are going into production and actually influencing, say, the business process. Also, effectiveness and efficiency are still measured a lot. What a lot of clients are not measuring is actually the added value or the experience, especially also on non-functionals. A lot less is mentioned. So the actual return on investment or the added value of QA is not measured in most metrics.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting because, as I think back over the years, the quality was measured by absence of negative. So, are we taking out defects? Are we removing bugs? So it was, we define quality the way we define hygiene, which is absence of negative. I think what's very interesting to see is that quality is becoming so strongly correlated with business outcomes. What we're seeing is quality is increasingly being measured by presence of strong positive. Can I get to a better product? Can I get to more digital adoption? Can I drive change? Can I understand my customers better? Right? And I think that's been a big shift over the years in terms of how leading companies think about quality, how the business assurance oriented companies think about their partner ecosystem. So when we asked everybody how they think about their partners or what kind of value do they seek from their partners, right? Business assurance oriented companies are very, very strongly focused and wedded to the idea that their ability to leverage the partner ecosystem is critically dependent on whether they're getting sufficient innovation and thought leadership from their partners, whether they're getting access to the latest technology and capabilities, and whether their partners are bringing meaningful differentiated IP to the table, whether they're getting best practices and processes, right? Cost and efficiency and scale is relatively further down the list. And this is not only in sharp contrast to their peers who are more focused on some of the efficiency objectives, but also it reflects a sea change in how we have seen the industry evolve over the years. So it's a little bit, if you think back a few years, it's almost like there's a little bit of an inversion in value seeking. Andreas, what's your thoughts on this? How have you seen this change happen over the years?
I think you made it very clear at the beginning when you said we moved from negative to positive, and I think what we see in terms of change is that with digital and agile, people start to understand they are now dealing with their end customers, moving away from an internal situation to something that becomes very public. If you take Southwest Airline, I mean, at the end of the day, it's funny, right? They just had to communicate with their pilots using paper again, and that does not work at scale. So at the end of the day, the impact was that, I mean, it was a major press storm after that. CEO is talking, and suddenly quality becomes a CEO problem. and it's not a CI problem. Anyway, nobody spoke with the CIO, asked what had actually happened. They basically had denial of service, and then suddenly it becomes the problem of the CEO. So what I think is going to happen, and we see that already, analysts are asking the question, are you well protected? Are you resilient? Is your IT up for the kind of business that you are running? And of course, whenever something goes wrong, you go back to your IT department and say, guys, but that's not happening to us. So I think, as you said, the focus will become to, are we having it under control for the sake of delivering to the commitments that we have made to our clients?
So in a lot of ways, the ecosystem is responsible for assuring the business commitment that an enterprise makes to its stakeholders. Yeah, and I think that's again a big sea change. So it's a big change from hey, I need 50 people, right? To here I need to protect the brand and I need to protect the business. Hybrid operating model as the model of choice. Let's move on. So how do we wrap all of this up? What does it really mean? So firstly, enterprise quality is a boardroom conversation. It's not about IT, it's not about the app, as Andreas mentioned with his Southwest example. It's about the business. It has very clear business implications. The corollary to that is that if we have to establish this as a boardroom conversation, we have to sign up to be measured on business impact and product impact, right? We can't say it's a business conversation, but insist on measuring it on defect reduction, right? Third, it has to, we have to look outside, right? The world is too big, too complicated, and too heterogeneous for us not to look outside for inspiration, right? It could be your talent partnerships, it could be your services partnerships, it could be your technology partnerships, it could be your partnerships with academia, with researchers, with communities, with external developer communities. But there is tremendous value in thinking about expanding your ecosystem and looking at superior value from that ecosystem. Finally, and I really can't stress this enough, it's again, a strong central quality function is a strategic asset. However, it needs to operate in sync with decentralized teams, and we need to drive clarity between what each of those two functions really do. So those are our 4 key implications, and we'd love to hear your questions, your observations. Don't forget to download the report. And with that, let's open up for comments and Q&A.